Okay, I've got something to admit, which is kind of embarrassing, considering I spend my entire life wandering the world telling people about this thing. Scrum is really simple. So my wife is, she looks after our children at the moment, but she used to be in pharmaceuticals. She's a biologist, got an MBA. She's a very smart, amazing, beautiful woman. I think she was drugged when she met me. I'm not totally sure. And I'm hoping it doesn't wear off, but so I keep just buying her things, hoping that distracts her. I find that strategy works well, gentlemen, just for the thing. Anyway, so she says, Dave, what do you do? You know, you have had that conversation. What's this Scrum thing? Is it about rugby? No, it really isn't, love. So I explained to her Scrum. I say, Scrum is basically a very simple set of ideas based on 3 underlying principles. Empiricism, or scientific method. She goes, oh, you mean learn by doing, get rapid feedback? I said, yes, you got it. She goes, oh, yeah, I understand that, yeah. And then self-organization, you allow teams to, because you don't know the problem you're solving, you can't tell them how to work, so you allow them to self-organize, decide the role. She goes, oh, that's interesting, yeah. So like a team would define, she's a coach and a personal trainer as well. And she goes, oh, like how we sit around and we talk about how the team works, and the best teams work when you allow them some freedom and you allow people to I said, yeah. And then continuous improvement. She goes, oh, yeah, like you should always be focused on getting better. I'm always focused on you getting better, Dave, she says. And I'm like, oh, great. She goes, I have a list of things that you do really badly that we need to improve. I'm like, yeah, let's not talk about that, honey. But she goes, she said, yeah, and? I said, no, that's it. That's what Scrum's based on. Well, that's really, really blooming simple, isn't it? She said. Why do you spend your entire life telling people about it? I'm like, well, because I tell some jokes. She goes, yeah, good. Anyway, so we get into this conversation about how simple it is. And Scrum is really, really simple. It's an embarrassment that we still are having trouble with it. And we'll talk a bit more about why that we have so much trouble in a second. But Scrum is really, really simple. Now, to do Scrum well requires you to have discipline. To do Scrum well requires you to have a value system that allows transparency and trust to manifest itself through psychological safety. To do Scrum well requires you to be maniacally focused on a customer outcome. To do Scrum well requires you to help people get better, because not only will that help you, but ultimately it will help the entire environment to accept Scrum. But that is at the heart of what Scrum is. But without those values, it's incredibly hard to practice. So Scrum has 5 values: courage, focus, commitment, respect, openness. Now, does it have to be those 5? I don't really care what values you pick. The outcome that I seek with the values is psychological safety. The outcome I seek with the values is an environment for empiricism to work. The outcome I seek with the values is self-organization being effective. The outcome I seek with the values is an environment that allows people to improve it continuously and gives them the freedom to do it. Courage, the desire and the ability to stand up and say, hey, I don't like this, or I think this is good, or I kind of let you all down. I was embarrassed. Focus, the idea that we focus on one thing, not because it's the only thing that's important, but because we want to get something done. The idea of commitment, not that we're committed to an outcome, but we're committed to the process. We trust the idea of empiricism. We trust our team. We're committed to each other to deliver value. Respect, the idea that we are kind and respectful for everybody. Kindness is fundamental to Scrum working well and Agile working well. And in fact, what's really, really interesting is we did a study with McKinsey. You know, so McKinsey, some of you may know them. They're this boutique, very large management consulting company that helps organizations change, helps countries change. I think it's being sued by Chile at the moment. You know, it's a really interesting organization. We work with them. They're very into Agile, and we work with them quite closely on a number of ideas. And one of them was about Agile personalities. We did a big survey, and we got some data, and we compared. They did a really good job working with us, turning it into some findings. One thing that we found that was kind of odd was around psychological safety and agreeableness. We found that modern teams need to have an environment that is psychologically safe, no surprise there, and one of the important traits is agreeableness. Yes and, not yes but. You listen more than you talk. I'm not very good at that, by the way, as you can imagine. But you listen more than you talk. I think that's also on my wife's list of improvements for me. You listen more than you talk. You ask questions of people to understand their point of view rather than telling them they're wrong. Now, you could call that respect. You call that kindness. You could call that being a good human being, in my opinion. But respect is fundamental, and openness, a willingness to share, a willingness to become uncomfortable sometimes, sharing things when they go wrong, sharing things where you misunderstood something, sharing things when you feel uncomfortable. There's a really good, some of you may have heard this, there's a PST called Dave Dame. Dave Dame is paraplegic. He's in a wheelchair. He's an awesome guy. He's also a little bit rude. He sort of like uses being in a wheelchair to get away with telling really rude jokes, which I think is awesome as well. He talks about the ability of managers now, or leaders, to basically be a little bit outside their comfort zone. Because he says he's always outside his comfort zone. Every time he sees a staircase, you can imagine what that's like when you're in a wheelchair. He's always a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit embarrassed. And he talks a lot about that. But these values create an environment that agility can thrive, that Scrum can thrive. Unfortunately, though,